Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning still. Congratulations on surviving 3 nights in Austin, and you're still in your chairs here on Friday morning. That's worth a round of applause for everybody right there. All right, we have a great topic to talk about with you here today, and I'd like to start with introducing my panelists here. My clicker is not working. If someone could fix that. First off, Andrew Flackner, from the CEO and founder of Real Scout. Hi, Andrew. And next, Kathy Libby, the CEO of Main Listings. And last, Leo Pareja, the CEO from Remine. How are you? All right. Okay. So our topic for the panel is immersive technology, and we had a little bit of a debate on one of the pre-calls as to exactly what that means. So I do have a definition on the screen there that everybody can read, but first of all, I want to say what it is not. It is not when you drop your iPhone into a pool, or God forbid, drop your iPhone into a toilet. That does result in your technology being immersed, but it is not immersive technology. So what we're going to talk about today is immersive technology, which these are new devices that are coming out on the market, AI devices. Many of you have Alexa at home, VR devices, headsets, and AR devices. And any type of technology that sort of blends the digital world with the physical world. So first off, machine learning and artificial intelligence. What I love about these devices is it's sort of a conversational type search, right? So it takes down barriers of using technology, right? You can speak to your Alexa instead of having to type. And it helps you get a little bit more immersed into the technology. The second category we're going to talk about today is virtual reality, which is a completely virtualized experience. So you're wearing a headset. It's great for gaming. It does have some use cases in real estate, which we're going to talk about today. But it's a completely virtualized world. The third category is augmented reality, which is sort of a blend of the virtual world with the physical world, right? So I don't think about this in terms of Google Glass, which was many perceived to be a failure, because there are new devices that are going to be coming on the market, new smart glasses that really create a more augmented environment in which you can interact with technology. And these are really exciting ways to use information. In the example here, a person looking through an art gallery and being able to pull up augmented information, digital information about the painting and the artist and the like. We are going to talk somewhat about the technology today, but we're going to try and focus the conversation around use of the technology in real estate, and in particular, use of MLS data within immersive technology. All right? So first off, machine learning and artificial intelligence, this is more for Andrew, they kind of get interchanged a lot, those two. And they're not exactly the same, and it can cause some confusion. So let's just start off by talking about the difference between machine learning and artificial intelligence.
Sure. So when it comes to artificial intelligence, in theory, artificial intelligence should understand our world the way humans do. It should understand what it means for a home to have 3 bedrooms or a large front porch. It should be able to make inferences for a potential buyer to understand that this home is perfect for you because it has a beautiful view from that front porch. Now, in reality, the term AI is thrown around a lot in our industry, but we're still pretty far away from that level of comprehension, of understanding. And machine learning and artificial intelligence, machine learning and AI, these are terms that we use interchangeably in our industry, and that's okay because they are pretty much the same thing. It's using math and data to basically detect patterns in the data. And when it comes to how we're using that math today, what we're doing is we're using it for very specific functions. So understanding how likely it is for a home buyer to buy in a particular neighborhood, or taking a photograph from the MLS and identifying that photo is definitively of a kitchen instead of a bedroom. That's how we're using machine learning today. But it's almost like asking what kind of lens or what kind of camera you use to take a photograph of a listing. Sure, there are many different lenses out there, different cameras out there, and they all take slightly different pictures, but the function is the same. And when it comes to machine learning, there are plenty of different algorithms, but those algorithms are producing the same type of output. So the bottom line is machine learning and AI can probably be used interchangeably, but in both cases, we're pretty far away from machines understanding the world the way humans do.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. Let's jump over to Leo. What kind of examples do we have today of how machine learning or artificial intelligence is being used in the MLS space or in real estate in general?
So the interesting thing about that is we just kind of use them interchangeably like Andrew's saying, but how is that contextual and tactical to practitioners? And we need to be aware of that because of the amount of investment that's going on in the industry from the brands. So Keller Williams announced last year they're becoming a technology company. Realogy spent $166 million buying Zip Realty, which was the underlying technology with Zap Labs. They just executed a contract with a company based in Austin called Ojo Labs. That is a chat box. That's what's going to power Kelly Command. That's what's going to power Realogy's virtual assistant. And the founders of that company sold another little company called Yodel for $350 million. And they are based here, and they're trying to create this always-on virtual assistant. And the shift we're living through is more almost demographic-based than not only technological-based. If you read NAR and Zillow's generational report, more than half of all buyers today are under 36 years old. That means we're living through the first generation of consumers that were raised digitally. So they're completely comfortable buying stuff online. I think the best parallel is right inside of our industry. Rocket Mortgage was launched last year in February. So they didn't have a full year, and last year they funded $7 billion worth of loans through the app. If there were a standalone mortgage company, they would have been the 30th largest mortgage company in the United States. Their premise was it was going to be a refinance tool to protect their servicing portfolio. The actual results were 80% were first-time home buyers or purchasers, and 2/3 of that were first-time home buyers. So we're living through a shift where the consumer likes to be interacted in a digital way. The most used function inside of Rocket Mortgage was the chat functionality, and it's instant gratification. So these chat bots, which I think are the first thing we're going to have to deal with in AI on the MLS side, is that always on. So if you see a listing and you text a virtual assistant, what's the list price, how many bedrooms, and then that gets into the discussion of, okay, how do we give attribution to the brokerage? How many lines are we disclosing in that bucket? So that's where it becomes very real and very tactical in the short term for us.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's what we're already kind of seeing these chat features out there and I know there's some apps within Alexa where you can, I don't know how functional that is, you ask a question and it reads it back to you, and you have to listen to it, but certainly the chat box and having a link off to a detail page. So that kind of leads to the question of and I know we talked about this with Kathy, the concept of where do you cross the line between, does Alexa need a real estate license to provide this information, or what, where do we cross the line into licensing issues or those types of things?
Right, and that's really a state-by-state debate, because you do have license laws in each of the various states that you have to be concerned about. And that was one of the things that I brought up in May in DC when the change in policy was presented to allow the audio delivery of IDX data. And that was one of my concerns, I had my list of 10 questions, and in the interest of full disclosure, I'm still not an artificial intelligence expert. Thankfully, these two gentlemen are, so they're a huge resource, and that's part of the problem, is that we don't talk to these people that know what the technology of the future is going to bring. And if we don't start the conversation now, we are going to be behind the curve, and the millennials will continue to move forward, and we'll be eating their dust. So I think we absolutely need to start the conversation. CMLS is the place to do that, because it brings us all together, and we can actually plan for the future instead of being in a reactive state. We can actually be in a proactive state.
I love that, and I think that's been a lot of discussion over the last couple of days about being more proactive with our approach to these types of things. And I definitely want to dig more into that in a little later on here. I want to talk first about, let's shift the discussion from AI into like VR and AR, and starting with VR. So virtual reality, it's very immersive. It's, I've tried the Matterport tours on a VR headset, and it's fantastic, right? You're immersed in the house, and it's an amazing experience. It's great for gaming. I just wonder, how much practical purpose beyond, just viewing the inside of a property after. That's pretty expensive media to produce. Mm-hmm. So what other types of, for anybody, what other types of applications?
I want to jump in here because I got a nice anecdotal story. I had the pleasure of having lunch with Victor Lung yesterday, and he pulled out his iPad and showed the downloads off the Apple Store. And Matterport's had, if you're in the audience, was it 800 installed but 1,300 total downloads? So when we look at a technology, I'm always more interested in the distribution channel because that's what's going to lead the adoption curve. Right? If to buy a virtual reality set is $300 and you walk around bumping into things, the scale of that's not that interesting. Matterport's camera is $5,000 for the broker, and then the agent has to use it and then convince the consumer to adopt it. Why I was most excited for the iPhone release yesterday, or Tuesday, I'm losing track of the days, was there's an AR toolkit built into the new operating system, which means that everyone can start building augmented reality. So virtual reality to me is niche, and it's 20 years out. Augmented reality is going to become very real. And again, it's because the distribution channel's at scale, right? So Pokemon Go was probably the best example of how something can take off, but it can start being embedded into everything. So imagine being at a conference, you pull out your iPhone, and LinkedIn can read your face, and then you can see that CEO's from this MLS, that's an association person, and that becomes contextual into our everyday life. So VR is way in the distance and probably never mainstream, but AR, absolutely. And it'll start with our phones and then migrate to wearable technology.
Yeah, I can second that. I think that when it comes to VR, I mean, I'm in the heart of Silicon Valley. Most of my friends work in technology. I have one person in my entire network that owns a VR headset. And so it is incredible technology. I mean, if you've ever used it, it is absolutely immersive. It's beautiful. It may wow a client during a listing appointment. It may impress your friends, but it's certainly not something that's mainstream. And when it comes to AR, yes, now everyone has an AR device in their pocket. With Apple's announcement, most iPhones, actually most modern iPhones are capable of AR functionality at this point. It's going to be a while before we see apps or software that is very practical. I can imagine that within months we're going to see AR apps developed for the iPhone that are more novelty. It reminds me a lot of when the Apple TV came out, and there were big companies like Trulia, small companies like HomeSnap that put out apps for the Apple TV, and they were cool. It made a great headline, but they didn't really take off. That's not really the medium that consumers were familiar with. So it might take maybe 6 or 12, maybe 18 months before we see some real substantive apps.
Yeah, the big comparison to Apple TV, that's not mobile, right? So we're living through this shift of attention. So the last time we've had this massive attention shift was in the 50s from radio to television, right? The phone is become the remote control of our life. That's how we consume television. That's how we make reservations for restaurants based on the stars. It's how we get on an airplane. I don't even need my ID anymore because of Clear. They scan my retina, and I'm getting into an airplane now. So that is a fundamental shift we're living through that's very interesting.
Absolutely.
All right, so back to what you were talking about earlier. So the AR kit from Apple was introduced, I think, in June, right? So it's, for those of you who aren't developers, that means the purpose of that is to get application developers to more rapidly develop applications for AR. Reason being, on Tuesday, some of you were here already, you maybe didn't see the keynote yet, but the new iPhone X was announced, and it's chock full of AR functionality on the hardware side, right? So a lot of the camera technology, the gyro and the accelerometer, is that how you pronounce it? Is all of that is geared around AR functionality. So the point being, it's coming, right? You already have apps being developed for it. They showed something during the keynote, if you want to go back and watch it when you get home, an app where you pull your phone up to the sky and you get the constellation directly above you. And you can turn, and so you can, if you're doing that in the sky, you can think about how that could lend itself to real estate and being on a street and just holding your phone out, right? And beyond that, when we get to smart glasses, that becomes that much more functional, right? So Apple's pushing for this. Microsoft has similar initiatives. Google, obviously, similar initiatives. So when are we going to see something?
I think Andrew's timeline is very accurate. So I think the sequential timeline we're going to see is voice is going to become the next big operating system at scale.
Right.
The speed at which voice recognition has improved, I think is underestimated, right? My wife bought me Alexa for my birthday, and I thought it was a novelty, but I have conversations with Alexa. It's downright creepy. The other day I asked her who was smarter, her or Siri, and my iPhone said, "Did you say something?" I was like, "Are you serious?" Because I said Siri, my phone jumped in on the conversation. But so consumers always win. That's the thing we always need to remember. The reason portals took off was consumers were thirsty for information that we as an industry as a whole, and I'm not to point any fingers, because I was a broker for 15 years. I sold 4,000 homes. That's my passion. So what consumers want, consumers get. There's a very good book by Steve Case called The Third Wave that he released last year, and he talks about the Industrial Revolution and how technology changed everything in orbits, and it upended basic models that had a lot of friction. And the third wave he called are the ones that are systemic. And in his book, he called out government, healthcare, finance, and real estate. And he said the winners in the disruption, and I don't want to use the word disruption, I want to call it transformation, are the leaders inside the industry who get it and want to lead the charge. In mortgage, we're seeing, Quicken. There's a company called Blend that's creating products for the mortgage space, and Wells Fargo and US Bank and Movement Mortgage are all jumping on board. But I think the industry insiders are the ones more poised to bring value and keep the agent and the broker at the center of transaction, because the consumers need a professional holding their hand.
Yeah.
If I could jump in, I want to put VR in perspective, because I think that the biggest trend in our industry about VR is the amount of people on stage speculating about it. So when it comes to VR and AR, it's important to remember these are mediums for digesting content, right? And so what powers a lot of the content, and we talked about this earlier, is actually machine learning, right, and AI. So to bring it full circle to the beginning of this panel, that's honestly, some of the most impressive parts of these experiences is what's powering that medium. So when it comes to real estate search, when it comes to MLS data, we're going to see some pretty dramatic shifts in the way we digest that information. So, one example of what we're thinking about at Real Scout is, we have this concept in the industry of hard criteria, where a consumer is looking for a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, and then you get a filtered set of property data. But in the future, as machines become better at predicting consumer behavior and adapting to consumer behavior, we believe that there's going to just be soft criteria, kind of like when a consumer is working with a real estate agent. They do a buyer consultation, a consumer says, well, I kind of want to be in this price range, I'd love to be in this neighborhood. But what happens is the agent has the foresight to say, well, you know what, your search is probably going to adapt in this way. And so, I know you only want to buy a $600,000 house, but you probably consider a $650,000 house if it had that really great school district and that remodeled kitchen. So we're seeing that as one of the major shifts that's being powered by machine learning. And the second one is really what's possible with photography. There is a treasure trove of data being locked in photographs in the MLS. And as we get better at taking those photographs and reading them to discern details, classifying room types, which is something that we already do at Real Scout, but the ability to actually take a photograph of a kitchen and to identify that there's stainless steel appliances or a breakfast bar or French doors or skylights, that is going to really create a much more compelling search experience, whether it's something you look at through a VR headset or it's something that you look at on your smartphone.
Yeah, great point. I mean, I love that idea of the soft criteria, right? Because including homes.com, all the parameters right now are oriented around property characteristics. There might be a lot of properties that aren't being seen that have the exact type of kitchen or the exact type of backyard or the exact type of pool or whatnot. And if we can filter that stuff up better, soft criteria is a great term that we should use for that. So I want to leave the technology for a second here and talk about the use cases, data use cases, and the rules. I want to make sure we have enough time to discuss that. So So just right off the top, Kathy, has anyone come to you yet and said, I need data for my AR application?
Crickets. Not a
Crickets.
soul. Nope.
Okay. So I would suggest maybe that, this is sort of bleeding edge stuff still, and oftentimes bleeding edge stuff sort of flies under the radar, right? So just because no one is, and we won't do a show of hands, but all of you sitting there may not have had any of your brokers come and ask for data use for AR devices yet, but that doesn't mean it's not happening yet, right? Because the ones that are more technologically savvy, that are potentially already doing this, may not be asking for permission, right? So I think we need to be very proactive in our thinking here of how quickly we start to look at how we adapt the rules. So let's talk about the rules. So I'm going to read it straight off here, the MLS policy definition of IDX. IDX affords MLS participants the ability to authorize limited electronic display of their listings by other participants. So the key word there to me is electronic display. So to me, that's device independent, right? Now, right now, we're really caught up in the IDX world about its websites and its applications and its summary search results and its listing detail page. All the rules are kind of oriented around that framework. When you get into immersive technology, that framework really doesn't exist anymore, right? So, but I will applaud NAR and the MLS Policy Committee and the MLS community for revising that statement in May. This is what goes into effect on January 1st. So the limited electronic display is now limited electronic display and delivery. Okay, but that was more to handle the sort of the Alexa example or the AI example, not so much to handle display of this information in an augmented reality world. Okay, so my question would be, and I've got a more kind of controversial question I want to ask after this, but I want to start with will we be able to, and how quickly should we be looking at further adapting the IDX display rules to accommodate this type of technology?
So I think to start, AR and VR, I don't think it necessarily breaks a lot of the policy. Okay. It's a different medium for displaying data. And so when you're looking through a VR headset, or you have your phone up in an open house and it's somehow displaying some of the details about that property, it's just another visual medium to display that content. And so many of the disclosure rules would still apply. Mm-hmm. I think it's a lot different when you're talking about a chatbot like Ojo, or you're talking about Alexa, which is communicating through audio. But I think when it comes to VR and AR, I think a lot of the policy is actually probably sound.
Okay.
Well, I think the tactical takeaway for the folks in the room that we need to ask the question is it going to be a consumer-facing product or an agent-facing product? Because that's really how we police the folks that might try to get cute about it, right? Because whether it's going to be an auditory operating system or a text message one, it's, is this going to be external? Is this internal? And then that should become the litmus test that should stop all conversations, because if someone comes using a bunch of terms that you're unfamiliar with, it could be intimidating, and you may give access to stuff. And is it the 12 fields, or are you looking for 400 fields? And it should be binary in the sense if this is going to be consumer facing or not.
That makes sense.
Right, and the biggest mistake that we can make is to govern by fear. And fear is the unknown. And if we don't educate ourselves as far as what's coming in the future, then we're going to get defensive, and we're just going to close down and stop listening, which is the biggest mistake that we have made over and over and over again. And we've got to stop doing that, because change is going to happen whether we like it or not. So we've got to learn to communicate with these folks and our vendors, and also the third-party MLS providers have also got to jump on the bandwagon, because a lot of us rely on them for our technology, and they've got to be responsive enough to adapt to handle the changes that are coming down the road.
I think, speaking on behalf of the vendors, we would be more than welcome making changes if the rules can keep up with the changes that we want to make, right? So I want to kind of ask the more, I'm glad I got that feedback before I asked this question, because this is a little bit more controversial, but I loved it when Stefan yesterday had this comment, we own the rule book, we can change the rules, right? So in that context, I want to ask the question, do we need to blow up IDX policy and start over from scratch, right? And this is coming from, you know, one of the largest IDX vendors in the marketplace, right? But I sort of wonder, and I agree with what you said about some of the ways we're going to view this information isn't that much different than how we view it on the desktop today. But I really think, you know, culturally, we think of IDX in this framework of search results page, listing detail page, disclaimers, attribution to the listing agent, all of these different things that are really modeled towards a desktop, tablet, mobile application type world. And it's going to look different, right? And smart glasses are, within the next 10 years, a lot of people are predicting that we're not going to have phones anymore, we're not going to have TV screens, we're not going to have monitors. And that sounds far-fetched and crazy, but listen to the guy from Google yesterday, right? And think of what's changed in the last 10 years. That could happen in the next 10 years, right? And my concern is that if we, and certainly the IDX policy might be the place to start, but I just want to ask the question, is it time, do we need to blow this up? Brokers like James from Next Home yesterday, right? Didn't seem to, I don't know if he's in the audience today, but he doesn't seem to be a very patient person to me, right? Right, and he made the comment, and I'm paraphrasing, but sometimes the MLSs just need to get out of the way, right? I don't think he's going to be very patient when he finds an AR device that he wants to use in his brokerage for a competitive advantage, and our rules haven't gotten to the point where he can do that yet, right? So the question is, do we need to blow up IDX and start over with what we've learned from IDX?
I've got to say it's a good foundation. With any governance, I think it's time to be reviewed. A lot of our policies need to be reviewed. We actually went through the process 2 years ago through strategic planning, and we took our 60-plus pages of rules and regulations and pared it down to 32. And I'm actually thinking it's time to do it again and pare them down even further. We need to allow our participants, we need to empower them to be innovative. We cannot stifle their creativity. They've got to be able to compete in the marketplace, and we're doing that by layering more and more rules and regulations on top of things. And I think it is time to certainly review the IDX policy. Whether or not I'm ready to light the fuse on it, I'm not sure that I'm to that point, but it's certainly time to do a review of it.
So, you know, we have outstanding relationships with all the MLSs we work with, and, you know, we've spent a lot of time and a lot of engineering resources and a lot of money complying with all the IDX rules. Now, if we were to make those rules less intense, or we were able to consolidate or shrink those documents and those policies, what we'd find is I think there'd be a lot of new entrants into the market. We'd have a lot more innovation. Now that we've jumped through all those hoops, I don't know if it would be in our best interest, but certainly having new entrants in the market would be good for the industry. I think what frustrates James of Next Home, who's a partner of ours, or Real Scout, is that we are developing software for brokers, right? And yes, there's an interface for their consumers, but we are not a publisher. And so oftentimes when we are trying to innovate or push the ball forward, it's actually to benefit the broker, and it is the MLS sometimes that gets in the way. And not because they're trying to obstruct innovation or creativity, but because their own policies get in the way, and there's not a very agile way to adjust those policies in real time.
Yes. Well, and I don't mean to suggest that as a way that there shouldn't be rules, or it should be, I get tired of hearing, not to criticize startups, that's not what I mean here, but when new entrants to the market come in and expect, a single data feed and no rules and all, it's like, look, there has to be a minimum barrier to entry here to participate in this industry, right? You have to do some work and some heavy lifting to get there. My real concern is that we even call them IDX websites, right? I mean, this is not, the people that the Google guy, Jamie, talked about yesterday, that will think of his phone as a relic, they don't think in terms of websites already, and they're definitely not going to be thinking when they're using their smart glasses in terms of websites, right? So I think I want to not be constrained with search results and listing detail page and things like that, and advance the conversation beyond that. If it's not just to change the acronym, it's to change the thinking and the culture around the electronic sharing and display of this information. So we're running out of time here. I want to wrap it up with one last question. So Jamie from Google, he said yesterday, technology will continue to accelerate and you can't do anything about it. I thought that was a great comment. So last question, we'll give each of you a chance to answer. What should MLS organizations and technology providers be doing to prepare for this new technology? What can you do right now to start the process?
Well, from a vendor perspective, it seems like a lot of our communication with MLS is more reactive. It would be great to be proactive. It'd be great to spend more time with the MLSs to share what we have coming down the road in our roadmap, so that we can get ahead of the curve and better serve our brokers.
Good point.
I would absolutely love that, because I think as long as there's a channel of communication, there's got to be some education on our parts, because I know when we started talking about this panel, I had to actually ask them to slow down because I certainly wasn't privy to their jargon that they were using. So I asked them to, speak in English so that I could understand you. And and I really don't think I'm alone in that. I think we're so busy trying to run a corporation that sometimes we forget to look up, and we need to look up to the future and see what's coming down the road. And I think we need to do this, just start the conversation, realize that we're all in this together. It is organized real estate, so let's make it organized and let's work on this together.
To your point, Kat, organized real estate is actually a unique thing to North America. If you look at the rest of the world, first world countries, they don't have the cooperation and organization we have in this country and Canada. And I think that's a huge, kudos to us. I mean, we have the most sophisticated and least friction-driven real estate market in the world because of the MLS. The MLS gets a lot of grief, but you guys are the keepers of capital T truth. Right? And you make everyone play nice. And sometimes you catch grief, but that's such an important part of our industry. That's what makes us wonderful. So it's that partnership. And I think as more real estate companies see themselves as technology companies, and that becomes a value proposition to the realtor, the role of the MLS is going to become more important because it is a data-driven universe. So it's having this open dialogue as to what's coming, and importantly, always remembering what the consumer wants, because ultimately, whether the revenue comes from the agent, the revenue really comes from the transaction being born from the consumer.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to answer the question too, since I got the mic here. But so. I'll draw the analogy to back in right around 99, around that area. When IDX policy was developed from a reactive position. What I mean by that is Realtor.com, Home Advisor, Home Seekers, these portals were getting the listings, putting them on, and brokers wanted to do the same. And yes, there were some examples of that happening in Minneapolis and in Seattle and possibly other places as well. But collectively, as an industry, we developed the IDX policy from a reactive position, which limits your ability to structure a program exactly the way you want it to. When you come at it from a proactive position, like we have the opportunity to now, it's a blank slate. And as Stefan said, we own the rule book and we can write the rules. So I would encourage us quickly, I'm talking right away, start thinking about we own the rule book, how do we write these rules and be proactive about it so we don't get caught in another reactive position. So I want to thank the panelists, and I want to leave you with a quick book plug. If we can bring up, if you're interested in these types of technologies, there's a fantastic book that's a very easy read. It's called The Fourth Transformation. Robert Scoble, many of you have probably heard the name. He's a tech evangelist. He spoke at a company event we had earlier this year and talked about this book, and it got me extremely intrigued in this type of technology. This book, The Fourth Transformation, what he means is, this is the next transformation in how people will use computers and technology going forward. It's available on Amazon. I looked yesterday. They have inventory. It's Kindle. It's audio and paper book. So anyhow, check that out if you're interested in it. I've already recommended it to some people here that enjoyed it. So good luck with that. Thank you, and have a good rest of your conference. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.